you, councillors. Apologies for the delay at the start of the meeting. We had our meeting overran, so we've had to delay it till 4:30. Hope it hasn't inconvenienced anyone too much. So today we've got a special council to discuss one specific item about the combined county authority. Are there any apologies, Mr. White?
There are a few, thank you, Mayor. We got apologies from Councillors Ball, Councillor Calder, who is online via the Teams link, Councillor Casbolt, Councillor Guthrie, Councillors Kimber and Leach, who are both on the Teams link, Councillor Squire, Councillor Vashon, who's on Teams, Councillor Wakeham, and Councillor Watts, who's also on Teams. Members.
Thank you. Right, declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest not entered in the authority's register or non-pecuniary interest which they may have in any item of business on the agenda, subject to the exception for sensitive information, and to leave the meeting prior to discussing and voting on an item in which they have a disclosable pecuniary interest. Are there any such interests, members? So item number 3 on the agenda, the proposed Devon and Torbay combined authority and devolution deal. Can I have a proposer for that, to introduce it? The leader, please.
Thank you. Haven't really talked about this. I'd like to welcome Phil Adams from Devon County Council, who's on the call. Hi, Phil.
Hello, leader.
There you are. Right. The report is as it is. There are many items in it, and there's been much discussion about the item. I don't know whether the Chief Exec wants to go through any further. The one thing I would really ask everyone to take note of is that there's been a change to the papers that you've just been given for the recommendations. Please note that we are only noting, not endorsing, supporting, for or against. We're none of those, we're noting. But also, we have reasons of note, and they are within the papers. So a formal letter after this meeting, and if any other changes are made, will be sent to Devon County Council as our consultation response to their consultation. When their consultation has come back in and the dates have closed, then you will come back to us again, won't you, Mr. Adams, with your review on the consultation?
Yes, the review of the consultation responses will be published, issued to Devon County Council and Torbay Council, who then are to make a decision, but we will come back around. Yeah.
Right, okay, everyone. So does everybody understand where we're going, or does anyone need a summary update of where we are? I don't know, everybody's knowledgeable. Right.
Are there any questions, councillors?
Councillor Edmonds.
Yes, Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Mayor. I've actually got 2 questions, if I may.
Yes, you're allowed unlimited questions.
Sorry?
You're allowed unlimited questions.
Very kind of you. My first question is, well, the Devon County Council Chief Executive's report states that once established, the CCA will be an employer in its own right and appoint officers including a Chief Exec, Monitoring Officer and Finance Officer. The arrangements will, as far as practicable, draw on the capacity of the existing authorities to ensure that the CCA is as cost effective as possible. The question is there a danger that this proposal could adversely impact already stretched human resources across the existing local government landscape?
Is anyone able to answer that question?
Mr. Bates, please.
Well, I'll give you my answer, if I may, Councillor Edmonds. So, I mean, I think it is uncertain, isn't it? The amount of funding that is available is clearly set out in the devolution deal. It's absolutely clear from what has been set out that that should be sufficient to cover the initial phases of the combined authority, should that proceed. But beyond that, there is uncertainty. But then again, there's uncertainty with our finances when we get beyond the medium term, and there no doubt is with all the other councils in Devon. So I think in terms of are we clear about the financial capacity to meet the immediate requirements of the combined authority? Yes. Beyond the medium term, as with us, it is less clear. Hopefully that's helpful.
Second question.
Can I perhaps just come back on that, if I may, Chief Exec, and thank you for that response. But I think this document gives an example of a shared resource, a shared human resource. So I'm thinking more about here the number of staff and sharing and the impact it will have perhaps on the resources of other councils that perhaps are providing those resources on a shared basis. What potentially could be the impact of that on human resources across the combined councils and the other I'll come on to the financial aspect with my second question.
I'm going to add to that, Councillor Edmonds, that what is left of the LEP, which has, well, it officially closes on the 31st of March, they have staff as well. And when I attended their overview and scrutiny committee in February, they were saying that the staff that they have at the LEP would probably come under the CCA because they would go with the LEP. That makes sense. So a bit like 2Ping is what I think they're looking at.
Point that was raised in that paper, but I'm able to find it. It seemed to indicate that the resource would be shared amongst other councils, not from an outside body.
So certainly it is the, sorry, Leader, if I may come in. So it's certainly the case that there will be a shared resource between Devon and Torbay, who will be the constituent authorities that make up the combined authority. And I think the indication is that that will be a very small team initially. We are already involved as a council, as one of the 8 districts across Devon, in the work of Team Devon. And the intention is that the resources that are attached to that will roll into the resources for the new combined authority. So it's inevitable that we will use some of our resource. I mean, the Leader and I both attend Team Devon. We're involved in other work across Devon as a whole. The Leader is the chair of the Devon Housing Task Force, and one of the emerging proposals is that there should be a subcommittee for housing, and that will take on much of the function of the existing Housing Task Force. So in that respect, I think the intention is that as much as possible of the existing resource and architecture is incorporated into this. But as I said, Councillor Edmonds, we're in uncharted territory. We've not had one of these before. County combined authorities are a pretty new thing, so we haven't really got a blueprint to refer back to. But I think the intent is clear. And of course, we will be able to assess the amount of resource that we need to put in, and we'll measure that against the value we believe that we're going to get from it.
One question now.
Thank you, Mayor. My second question is, in terms of finance, £1 million has been allocated from government for capacity building up to 2026-27. The CCA will be unable to raise the precept through council tax. I would seek assurance that it will not rely on funds intended to support our communities for its future sustainability. The question is, do we have any further knowledge of how the CCA will be funded beyond 2026 and 27 to ensure its sustainability?
No.
But there is the spending review, Councillor Edmonds, which when that comes down, whichever government is in power, when money is allocated. So, for example, our 16 million in a couple of years' time, and I think it does say the date in here, when the spending review is next looked at, that money will come down. The bit that we have no idea about is if you get another 1 million to take you through to the next spending review to administer to CCA. We have no idea on the answer to that question.
So the clear intention is that the establishment of the combined authority will lead to further devolution of powers and funding. So that concept is one that has worked well so far with the mayoral combined authorities. What we don't know, of course, is whether that model will continue to be the way in which all combined authorities and devolution deals function in the future. But that's clearly the intention, that we will get further powers and further funding devolved. But I'm afraid you are asking me questions that I am giving you a punt at the answer of, rather than giving you the answer, because I do not know. It's not our devolution deal.
Councillor Mann.
Similarly, I'm concerned a little bit about the funding mechanisms that are described because they're so generic, and I guess this may be something you have to punt on as well. But the particular provision that I was looking at was the provision that says the Devon and Torbay CCA will be able to use capital receipts from asset sales as revenue funding for public service transformational initiatives. And I think I'm concerned about that because I'm not sure that I understood what assets that the Devon and Torbay CCA it has, since it hasn't been established. And I'm wondering what those assets may be in the future, and who, how that decision to sell them for this transformational initiative will be done.
So I think I'm inclined to ask Mr. Adams whether he can answer that. To be honest, I think that the intention is that, as the leader has said, the assets that we believe will transfer to the combined authority are those of the LEP. So those are the only tangible assets that I can think of at this point, which would potentially form the basis of a group of assets that the CCA would hold. Clearly, what we have here is a piece of primary legislation which is being developed into a devolution deal. And some of that, I suspect, is generic text, which applies in all of these deals and therefore is potentially exercisable at some point in the future, even if we don't particularly see the reason for it at this point. So I would like to bring Mr. Adams in, if I may, and he can correct me where I've gone wrong.
Thanks, Chief Executive. Yes, it's in there as a residual, actually, and you're right. It's a residual from other deals. The one reason they leave it in is because we do inherit some assets from the LEP. We also inherit, because of the way that the CCA is structured, some county council assets. It'd be around some of the transport infrastructure if you're taking forward certain development projects, because the CCA would be taking them forward with the county. We have to have some kind of mechanism for us to be able to dispose and then reinvest. So it's been left in. It's not really as pertinent in Devon as it is in places like Manchester, where obviously the mayors have a much greater role about development. Actually, with our CCA, it's more remnants of the previous infrastructure piece. Would you like me to just comment on the funding piece as well? Because I can comment on that if that's useful.
Please do. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, just around the funding piece. So yes, there's £1 million of revenue that's been announced through the deal. The piece that's not probably as explicit, but it's fine for members to be aware, is that we do receive a certain amount of revenue against some of the activity strands as well, which previously would have been handled by Whitehall. So I'll give you an example. On the adult education budget, when that's devolved, at the moment they take as DFE around 4% off the top. It will get devolved down to us. We'll probably get less for the administration, but actually that's more than ample for local authorities to deliver the service. So what I would say to members is, whilst there is some uncertainty about the long term, and as Councillor Ewing and others have said, there's some issues around spending reviews. Actually, there is a little bit more revenue. The revenue from the LEP as well is due to transfer in early April, and we're already working around some of the logistics of some of the people and revenue aspects that we get from that. So it's probably more complicated. Some of that will come through in the business case as we get into the actual delivery of the combined authority.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. I've got two questions. I'm not really expecting the Chief Executive to be able to answer them because we're in that difficult territory. But the first one is the paper from the centre, the CCA, says in fairly stark terms that the LEP was a failure. I think we probably, if we voted on that, we'd probably go along with that. I can't see anywhere in this paper that prevents the CCA from being a failure. There don't seem to be any performance metrics. There's no business plan. There's no way of auditing their performance. There is an ONS committee. We don't really know what that will do. So I think we're going to be jolly careful that we don't swap a failed LEP for a failed CCA. That's a statement. The second question is, at para 27 of the same document, it says no local authority functions are being removed from any local authority. And it says with the exception of transport. The next paragraph says the Devon and Torbay CCA will be given powers in relation to housing supply. I can't compute those two statements. What powers is it going to be given when it comes to housing supply? And who does it get those powers from?
Well, I'll have a go at responding if I may, and I'll leave my phone a friend at the other end to answer when I get it wrong. So I think the point you make about the LEP is a serious and important one, and it has been debated in the council a number of times. As Mr. Adams has said, what is before us today is a principle. The principle of the LEP no longer existing and it rolling into the CCA is not one that I think we will perhaps lose any sleep over. The important point you make, Councillor Cheadle, about the delivery of the CCA is absolutely right and proper. And I think what Mr. Adams will tell us in a minute is that the business case is the mechanism by which we will see exactly how that will work. And then all of us, through our involvement, either as constituent or non-constituent authorities in the CCA, will hold it to account through that mechanism. But I'm going to ask him to answer that one first, if I may.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, just to concur. So the metrics in the business case, we don't get away quite that easily. The metrics are set nationally and actually will be given a set of metrics around productivity, job creation, inclusion, investment. There'll be a range. The business plan that we have to form is actually the first job of the CCA when it's set up. It needs to go back to government within 3 months, and actually that's part of the assurance. The other side of that is that it's actually subject to formal scrutiny, and we have to set the scrutiny arrangements up within 2 weeks with public call-in, and we will be scrutinised against that business plan and the metrics. So there is quite a lot of positive feedback around some of those metrics. It is all, as the Chief Executive has said, it's all around the business plan that's going to be the key bit. And obviously we as a group, both the constituents and district authorities, will have a big role in setting that business plan.
So I think what we're hearing is...
The second question about powers.
So on that one, actually, it is correct because it's a bit of a bizarre one. The housing powers that the CCA receives are, it gets to share Homes England's existing compulsory purchase powers under the Act. It's a hangover from those who've got brownfield land release funds, but that's the only housing power it gets. And bizarrely, we've already got that. Every single authority has the ability to do CPO using the brownfield powers. It's a carryover from previous bits of legislation.
I come back on that. I mean, thank you for that honest answer. I have to say that characterises much of the paper, that a huge number of things in this paper, which apparently the CCA are going to be able to do, we can already do ourselves.
Any more questions, councillors? Oh, Councillor Saxby.
Okay, so I probably wasn't quick enough off the mark, but a recap would be appreciated. And then I have two questions. So a recap would be appreciated. And then I have a question on the role of, if we do go with the CCA, the role of Devon County Council and what rights we'll have from them and what rights they'll have. And then that'll lead into my final question around taxation towards them. But a recap would be great.
Well, as we've got the expert in the room, I'm sort of inclined to let you do it, Phil. So we had an all-member briefing. We went through all of the detail. Phil answered questions in that session. And obviously we then had a Q&A for members after Phil had left, but clearly I know you weren't able to be there. So Phil, can you very briefly, without the PR, shall we say, go through the headline facts? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we are consulting on the creation of a county combined authority for Devon and Torbay. The county combined authority will be a new local government body, a sort of partnership body, made up of 8 voting members, 6 members from the constituent authorities, which are Devon County Council and Torbay, and 2 non-constituent members from the district councils. And the intent is that they'd all be voting members, but we do have some differences in voting rights, which is in the presentation between the constituent authorities and the non-constituent authorities. It's mainly around things like approving the annual budget and around approving extraordinary projects. We have a bit of work to do through the constitution. Underpinning that is a set of powers that government is seeking to pass to us, worth around 50 to 60 million pounds a year at the moment. Which includes things around local economic development, housing, transport and skills to greater or lesser degrees. And members around the room will know that there's various differences in there. What we're looking for here in the consultation is seeking partners' views for the 2 constituent authorities who are under the Act, the responsible bodies. And it's important to say that under the Act, it's constituted nationally that way. We have to go out and ask partners, but actually it's the 2 upper tier constituent authorities that then have to make the decision. What the consultation is seeking councillor views and is seeking feedback on the proposals that government's put to us around that deal, that 50-60 million pound deal, and whether or not we're comfortable as an area to move forward with the county combined authority. As Andy said, there's a huge amount of detail that sits behind that, but I think in essence, Andy, that's the main crux. I think the other thing that's probably worth mentioning for district members and for members around the room is that as Devon, we're looking to underpin that with a fairly significant set of accountabilities and scrutiny arrangements, not just the standard scrutiny, but we've also agreed to put in place a joint committee of the county, district authorities, national parks and DALC, which will inform some of its activity, and that's formally constituted. And we've also got a set of advisory boards that will work with the CCA, which will be made up of local government, district partners, business, skills, dependent on subject, and they'll have quite a lot of say and power over the way that the CCA operates. So in effect, it's a new partnership body that will bring things down from Whitehall in terms of powers, but we do have to go through a formal consultation process, and we're looking for views. And I think as we spoke about at the start of the meeting, this isn't about right or wrong answers. It's purely just about getting feedback and getting people's responses to the proposals that government's put forward.
So if I could just add to that, Councillor Saxby, because I think the important thing is that we've set out in the report the issues which we think are main ones for us as district councils. So I would refer you principally to section 3 of the report. So as a principle, we are clearly in favour of devolution of powers and funding from government to us as local authorities. I wish that they would devolve all of it to us and let us get on with managing and organising how we support the people of West Devon. We would be far better off if we did. But what we're being offered is something quite bizarre. It's called a devolution deal, but it's a bit like going into a restaurant and you can have the menu of the day and that's all they're going to give you. So it's predetermined by the statutory legislation. And in that act, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, it prescribed the powers that could be devolved. So you can have anything as long as it's in that piece of statute. And that is why we have the deal we have. And as Phil's been explaining in replying to Councillor Cheadle, that creates some of the quirks. We've got a, if you like, a blueprint devolution text, some of which is more and some of it's less relevant to us as a Devon area. But the point about the principle is important. So we absolutely, I think, all supportive of devolution. The concerns we have are set out in paragraph 3.3, and these are the ones which, as a council, we feel are the right and pertinent messages to be sending back as part of the consultation, which is that in terms of our economic programmes, we have benefited significantly from the UK SPF fund being devolved directly to us as a borough. I think that's been one of the most powerful things we've had in the last year or two to support our local economies, and the work we've done through that has been absolutely aligned to the council's plans and priorities. So the idea that that money, should there be a further allocation of that, should go into the combined authority rather than to us is, I think, a point of principle that we should absolutely be making. The thing about housing is really important as well. We have a housing task force. We have a pan-Devon housing task force, which the leader chairs. And what we need is a mechanism which is going to actually deliver the affordable housing that we desperately need across Devon. So the true test of the CAA is, can it help to facilitate that to come about? And that is why we are suggesting that the housing task force is an incredibly important part of the structure at the moment. It should be incorporated into the new CAA, and that we believe, or at least our proposal is, that the combined authority should be tested against its ability to deliver on what the Devon Housing Commission says we need and the mechanisms it's proposing. We've got issues around governance and voting because we believe that districts should have a full voting right. But the way the legislation was written, it was prescribed. So the government decided that only upper tier authorities could have full voting rights. So our argument is not with Devon or indeed with Torbay about that. They didn't make that rule. That was set down by government, but we have no choice about it. But making the point that it's unfair and undemocratic is an important point. Transport powers are ones that the upper tier authorities have always had. So there's no change there. It's not as if we're losing powers. But where transport infrastructure is placed is critically important to our success as a place. So having the ability to be part of that conversation is important. And of course, much of what we do, in fact, everything we do as a borough, is about trying to meet the needs of our residents and communities. So the idea that community should also have an important part to play in the devolution deal is also there. So I'm drawing out the things that I can answer, but obviously the detail of the deal is as Phil described. Has that helped a bit at least?
Yeah, that's helped loads. So some points that were coming up, and then from what I read, so yeah, so we're taking on some like transport, housing. What role will, let's say this gets implemented, what role will Devon County Council be playing moving forward? Is it another layer of bureaucracy that, you know, like it's really difficult to get hold of people in Devon County Council to get what you need because they focus on areas like Exeter and Tavistock, total sense population wise, but will the CCA be another layer of bureaucracy? And then the other so then you have to go through more people to get what you want. So what will Devon County Council's role be? And then the other question is, okay, so we set up the CCA, and it just and again, this is my understanding, it sounds like from the LEP didn't work, the Shared Prosperity Fund, let's say we devolve and we get these CCAs, do we have to bid for funding from central government against other CCAs? Is that how the structure will work? Because I'm thinking about collaboration or competitiveness between areas across Devon and how that helps us as a whole.
So
those are my two questions.
So there's quite a lot in what you've said. So so government always likes local government to bid for funding. It's part of the way in which they control us, isn't it? And they put us through the hoops, and they'll always put us through the hoops in terms of what they fund us for. One of the principles behind the housing part of this is to try to ensure that we have a streamlined access to housing, to housing funding. So so the intention is that we will be able to collaborate through the housing subgroup and form a view on that. Now, of course, it's very difficult because at the end of the day, we will want housing to come for our needs in West Devon. Exeter will want housing for Exeter. But we have to try to work together to make sure we maximise the amount of funding that, first of all, comes to Devon as a place. So the principle here about it's not ring fencing Homes England funding, but what it's saying is we will have a priority opportunity with them. So that should remove some of that bidding. But the proof of this is in the eating. Will it make it easier for us collectively to access those funds? Will it mean that the Devon slice of the pie is bigger or not? Those are the tests, coming back to what Councillor Cheadle asked. I think those are the true tests. Do we get more? Does it achieve more? Is it effective for the people of West Devon?
So by having the CCA instead of Devon County Council, I know we elect our county councillors, but it means district councillors who work even closer can then say at a higher level, look, this funding, we need this housing here, instead of a few county councillors that we have going, oh, we have a housing issue. District councillors can then go, look, this is why we need it, because they have focused knowledge.
So I mean, we have the housing function powers as a borough currently, and the other districts do too. What this will seek to do is to formalise that arrangement. So we have an informal arrangement. The housing task force it's a partnership. It's an informal partnership. What this would do would be to formalise that. It would make clear what its powers are and how it works. And as Phil has described, at the moment we have a Team Devon meeting. It's a meeting of all leaders, the county council leader, district leaders, and chief execs. We have a very productive and collaborative approach through that, and things get done. In this proposal, the intention is to formalise that into a joint committee. I don't think it will make much difference in terms of how responsive Devon County is to your questions, Councillor Saxby, but maybe Phil will reassure me that something otherwise. It won't really change that relationship. It will create this new body, and the test of the new body will it get additional funding from government? Will it get more powers devolved? And will we see the difference on the ground? But I don't know whether, Phil, you want to come in and perhaps help me a bit here.
No, I mean, I think just to build on what you just said, I mean, will it change some of our operational responses as Torbay and Devon? Not immediately. It may over time, and it may provide new opportunities on certain subjects for us to be a little bit more streamlined. I mean, certainly around economic development, where we're moving towards a situation where you've got a democratically controlled team which is working across us all, there are some opportunities there. But hand on heart, can I promise that for every service? No. And I think that is, you know, I'm a county council officer. I think, you know, we all know it's tough times across local government and we have some challenges. In terms of the CCA, though, it does give us some ability to do things in a slightly different way, and certainly approach government as a partnership in a slightly different way. I think as Andy has described, as the county council, and I think as Torbay and as district councils, you know, there are challenges around what we've been offered, but there are also great advantages in the ability to go back to government as a partnership and as a whole and speak with a single voice, perhaps in a way that we haven't always been able to And even when we have, it gives us a formal status that government respects perhaps more than just a collaboration that we've had before. You know, evidence from elsewhere in the country says that where a devolved area exists, government is much happier to speak to a devolved area than not. And I think that's one of the things that we've all got to consider. It's not a reason to do it, but it is one of the benefits that you get from having a CCA.
Okay, yeah, that's cleared everything up massively. So you're doing it already, this working collaboratively for housing, but it formalizes it. It gives more weight to what you're doing and recognition, which means a better chance of receiving that funding and an emphasis on the need in areas. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, I think that's the hope. We have to make sure that that's what it actually delivers if it goes ahead.
Thank you for your questions. Now, Councillor West, followed by Councillor Oxborough.
Thank you, Mayor. I seek just to sort of build on that perhaps a little bit. I seek some clarification and some reassurance on this. First of all, clarification on housing powers. Am I then to believe that really, I mean, I think we can all applaud the use of the CCA to help get more affordable housing there. But based on a comment, I can't remember whether it's Andy or Phil said it, that do we mean then that basically the only power it's got is about freeing up brownfield sites to allow extra housing? That's a comment, concern there. And then, but my biggest concern is obviously we've been heavily involved with discussing and reviewing the JLP today, and the issue is, of course, Plymouth have withdrawn from this from the CCA. And obviously, our JLP, Plymouth is a big part of that in terms of housing and that. So I suppose my greatest issue is, or concern is around, are there going to be any tensions around that? And it's the fact, some reassurances that it is happily going to work with Plymouth as part of the JLP, if that makes sense. So sort of some clarification, then some reassurance. If that's possible.
So can I do the JLP bit, and I'm going to leave Phil to do the housing bit again, if that's so. We already have a very effective working relationship with Plymouth and with South Hams and with West Devon as part of the joint local plan. In terms of what it's required to do in terms of national delivery of housing numbers, is one of very few local plans in the country which is delivering. Is it achieving everything we wish it to? Well, no, there are things we want to do to improve it, but we are in a really good place compared to many local plans in terms of what it does and how it does it. And we will always have, so we have, I mean, the most important partnership we have as a council is with South Hams. We are used to working in partnership. The partnership between the two councils is immensely strong, and we benefit enormously from it in terms of what we're able to deliver for our communities. Our relationship with Plymouth is different, but it's equally strong around something real in terms of the joint local plan. I don't think any of that will change, Councillor West, as a result of the devolution deal. I think those partnerships remain utterly critical to us, and we will continue to focus effort on them. And we'll do that whether Plymouth is or isn't part of the devolution deal. I mean, I think it's worth making the point that in terms of national governments, the current government has its own approach to devolution, and other national parties are similarly enthusiastic about different versions of devolution. So I don't think it's particularly whether we have devolution or not. It's more a question of what flavour and what the opportunity is. And it might well be that at some future point, perhaps there's a change in national government, and perhaps a Plymouth City Council will become much more enthusiastic about a devolution deal that they can be part of. So, Phil, I'm going to give you the other bit, if I may.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so moving on to the housing question. Councillor, I think you've kind of summed it up. It's an interesting position on housing within a level 2 area. Whilst we have some smaller powers, or would have some smaller powers around the combined authority, in practice, no, it doesn't have a huge legislative role or formal role. It's not a planning authority. It's not really a housing authority. It's a body which is going to be brought together that has a convening role, really. And it's sort of empowered softly on the housing agenda through giving it this sort of role where it acts as a an additional option for getting into the discussions with DLUC and Homes England. It's not there to replace our housing authorities, nor should it. I mean, the conversations that we've had, and I've done, I think, 7 districts now around some of these, and actually I'm an ex-housing officer, is that we can't and shouldn't ever try to replace that. Local intelligence, local communities, local development is what gets things done. So that's not what it's for. So I think it's a fair point. It's interesting. Half of the county believes that's not necessarily a great thing because they would like the CCA to have more oomph. But I think there's a fair amount of the county that's view is that actually if we give it more oomph, it could interfere. And I think the view is that it shouldn't do that. We should leave housing to those that lead on housing, which is Torbay and our 8 districts.
Thank you.
Just add to that, just to inform you, Councillor West, the door has been left open to Plymouth. Plymouth are, as far as we're aware, still staying as part of the Devon Housing Task Force group, so they will come to those meetings. As the report sets out, and Plymouth has been added because I said they haven't left it. We haven't had a letter from them saying they wish to leave that group. I think a letter has been written to them, if I'm right, Phil, saying that the door is left open to them and that they can come into this if they should so wish. So for us, as the Chief Exec has already said, we do have tangible relationships with Torbay via the JLP, the Freeport, and with the Tavistock to Plymouth Railway. So there are tangibles of where we're working together, and Councillor Brazil and myself made it very plain when this was first put forward, did we not, Phil, that we had that relationship with Plymouth and we're not prepared to lose it either. So, you know, we have been quite straightforward and honest and said that is our view. But as I say, the door has been left open to Plymouth, and some bits they're interested in, aren't they, Phil? They've not slammed it shut on us either.
No, and I think just to reassure, we as Devon County Council similarly have been really, really clear that we can't close that door. We share the Freeport, we share our infrastructure, we share our public transport, even though we're not working together on it through the devolution agenda. We share our workforce, we share the college. You know, it cuts across a chunk of Devon, and I was on the phone to Jackie just the other day. We've been working closely with Plymouth since they've left the devolution partnership. It was a decision that was made about a specific issue, and the leaders on both sides have been really clear. We've kept a seat warm. It's always there if they want to join us. But in the meantime, we still have to work together on all of those things that count for the county, you know, whether you're on one side of the boundary or not. And we will continue to do that. Devolution is a process, and I think, as others have suggested, we don't know where we'll go in the future, but we are on both sides keeping our minds open. It's just at the moment there is an issue that's left us sort of apart. I think that's the way I would put it.
Thank you. Councillor Oxborough.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just ask, do I also get unlimited questions as Councillor Edmonds?
You do.
In that case, it's going to be a long meeting. No, I jest. Really, the question is really about, is this related to the current political cycle nationally? And I'm wondering what assurances we have, what confidence we can have that were there a change of government sometime later this year, maybe even sooner this year, who knows, will this become a redundant project, or is it something which will endure a change of administration at the top level? I'm thinking about the amount of work that's going into it now, and is it the right time to be thinking about it?
I'm going to have first go, if I may, Councillor Oxborough. So that is the $1 million question, which I have been balancing in my own mind for some months now. Is this a dead duck, or is it a gateway to an opportunity? It's very difficult to know, but I think what has weighed on my mind is the fact that all the major national parties have a positive view about the principle of devolution. And therefore, I believe in one form or another, devolution will continue and grow. So on that basis, I can see why Devon County and Torbay have put so much effort into this. And that's all I can really say. I think it's very difficult to know. I think the real challenge will be the passing of the legislation in the event that a general election is called a bit sooner than perhaps might be anticipated. But I think the assurances that Phil and his team have been given is that the officials in Whitehall believe that irrespective of that, this piece of legislation would still be passed. So, Phil, could you just come in, please?
Yes, so no, as you've just laid out, we have been exploring this. I think we all share that concern. Obviously, politics is always an uncertain venture around some of these things, but we've got assurances from each of the national parties that in some way they are looking to take this agenda forward, and the infrastructure around this, the combined authority, would be in some way the mechanism they'd be looking to use. I think in terms of the general election scenario, we've sort of had that discussion with officials at every level. The current feedback is that this would be moved forward regardless of what happens. If it happened earlier than anticipated, we'd likely get caught up in something called wash-up, whereby the legislation would be moved at pace to try and wrap this up between parties, and there's a process for that. Otherwise, this will be, they are looking to get this through by September, October time. If there's no purdah, we should be done before we get to the point where a general election is called. But I think overall, and as Andy said, the exploration around this is that every party, whether speaking to Exeter colleagues, speaking to colleagues around the districts, speaking to national colleagues on the Green side even, everybody is keen on the principle of devolution. The shape and the flavour may differ, but the mechanisms, there doesn't seem to be much dissent about how we're moving forward.
Can I just do my second question? It's my last one. I will promise you this is the last one. Assuming we get a degree of momentum going forward and this deal survives any change of government, do we have any assurances that any projects that are given by central government to be delivered will be followed by the funding in a way that doesn't leave them struggling? We see this so often with government initiatives where funding is disaggregated, and then the organisations like the multi-academy trusts, they get good money first year, a bit less a second, and then they find themselves struggling downstream. How is this going to pan out?
I don't really know how to answer that, because you're asking me to look in the crystal ball of government, and I'm just reflecting a bit on listening to the Today programme as I was in the car this morning, and the way in which government characterises local government as a place where there's lots of efficiency to be made and that we spend and waste lots of money on things. Well, that's not my experience of local government, and it's not the experience of local government across the country. Local government is under enormous pressure, doing amazing things with very little resource and a diminishing resource. So, Councillor Roxburgh, I'd love to be able to reassure you that there'll be more funding coming in our direction and that there won't be any changes of direction. But I think history tells us that that's very unlikely to be the outcome. Sorry to be so philosophical, but I can't really say anything else. So, Phil, do you want to add any reassurance?
To be similarly philosophical, I think we can do our best with the position that we find ourselves in now. The future is a foreign country. The only thing I would say, and it's not an assurance, but it is to give you a feel. One of the advantages of being a devolved area is that you become part of a wider group of devolved areas that work together around some of the funding piece. And whilst as local government we do that too, so far, if you look at the examples of the West Midlands or Birmingham, Manchester or Newcastle, they've been remarkably successful in continuity of funding across administrations and through processes. We would hope that by becoming part of that group, that we manage to retain and build on that sort of process that they've been through. 3-year settlements for the devolved areas have been something that's been seen time and time again. It's not always been that easy for those of us in the rest of local government, as we know. So I think, as Andy says, there's always a room for scepticism about it, but there are some advantages, and hopefully, that is one of the areas that it gives us a bit more strength in some of the funding settlements.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Roxburgh? Thanks.
Yeah, I did have another 10, but I'll pass.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, Isabel. Okay.
Miss Councillor Saxby.
Okay, so yeah, like reading over it again, understanding it better, I think the points that you've made and pulled out are great. And so this will get sent back to national government who's proposed this, or to Devon County. Okay, I'll go back to Devon County. And this is the final document. No alterations can be made.
You can make whatever alterations you want as a council.
Okay.
That is the proposal, that we should build a response on that basis. If in council, in this debate, collectively you decide that there are other important issues, then we can of course change it. Or you could give some indication perhaps to the leader of what you wished, and maybe we can do it that way, because I suspect that trying to do it by committee with 19 councillors in the room might be tricky. But did you have a particular
I
thought?
think that, yeah, I think the emphasis on housing is brilliant and is just what's needed. I think transport for me, I think just some more emphasis on transport would be nice, and playing a role. We know our areas best. We drive on these roads all the time. We know people getting buses every day. I think with net zero looming by 2050 and building more houses, I think that actually, I know we can't have better transport until we have the housing. It's the chicken and the egg, but perhaps just a change of wording to emphasize transport. And being involved in the strategic transport plan, because this is what they've done is another example of excluding rural areas, which are some of the most deprived in the UK. So I think if we have better transport for existing people, that will also help when housing comes. Some emphasis on housing or no transport would be really great. What's there is good, but some stronger wording.
It's absolutely fine by me if everybody else is happy with that. See anybody shaking their heads, Councillor Saxby? So I'm sure we can find something to reflect that in the wording, which I think Neil is in the process of amending as we speak, as he often does.
Any further questions, councillors? Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Right. May I, therefore, the recommendations are from the piece of paper we've just been given, not on the papers that you had to go with this meeting. So I'll read it out. That Council 1 notes in block capitals the intention of Devon County Council and Torbay Borough Council to enter into a devolution deal with government and to form a combined county authority. And 2, responds to the consultation in line with the considerations set out in part 3 of the report, subject to inclusion of the additions in the red font below that go throughout the 4 sheets of paper. May I have a seconder, please?
We're into debate now, councillors. 1 opportunity each. Now, would anyone like to start the debate? Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've been very fortunate in Devon that we've got 8 districts in Devon, quite diverse districts. They've been under different political control from time to time, and yet the districts have worked very well together in the Devon Districts Forum, and the districts have worked very well with Devon County. And when this idea was first mooted, John Hart, Devon County, was very insistent that the districts would have a voice in what went forward. It's therefore disappointing that no place has been found for the districts within the CCA directly. And I would like to support the district council's network view on this, which is that district councils are really important local organisations, local government organisations that are very close to their electors, and that a place should be found for them with the different tasks that district councils do very well. But nevertheless, we are where we are. I do think that we have a choice here of either being part of the process going forward or not, and I'd very much like to be part of that process, because then we can influence and we can try and shape the future devolution deal, whatever that might be. I also think that the topics that have been brought up in this paper to respond to the consultation are good and hit the mark. I mean, if I can put my economy hat on and particularly talk about the economy section, I agree entirely that we've received more funding over the past 12 months from UK Shared Prosperity and the Levelling Up Fund than we ever dreamed about in the days of the LEP. And it would be a shame if that were to not be the case in any future operational model that the CCA adopts. So in summary, I think we do need to be inside the tent on this one. We do need to be having that discussion. The alternative is that we're cut off as a small rural district council and that we don't have any say in what happens to us in future. And I think we should respond in the way that has been proposed in this paper. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Drury. Any more debate? Councillor Oxborough.
Thank you, Mayor. When I was a young lad, my dad said to me, if you want to get something done, do it yourself. Well, the devolution deal is kind of that for this area, except we're there but not quite there, as Councillor Drury has pointed out, as a borough council. But I'm hoping that should this come to pass and it survives any political turbulence in the next few months, that it will actually deliver, make it easier to deliver the things that are required in this area for the people in this area, who are the people that really matter to us, and that a mechanism is found by which borough councils can have a closer engagement and have greater influence than just simply being bystanders and noting things. We'd like to be at the party rather than just simply knowing it's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Well put. Thank you. Any more debate, councillors? Councillor West and then Councillor Ewings.
Thank you, Mayor. I do wonder, having read it and listened to the arguments of that, how much difference this is going to make to us in terms of impact on us. And I'm glad to say, hopefully, it won't make that much. But in some respects, we want it to have influence. We want it to support what we're trying to achieve at district level. And that's true. But then we want it to be effective. And if it's effective, will it impact on what we're trying to do at district level? It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But I would agree with my fellow councillors' comments that it is better to be in the room, in the tent, in there, trying to make sure that whatever comes out of it, we are involved in that and we can influence the outcomes of it. So I will support this recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ewings.
I could go last, please.
Councillor Mann.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really do support the ideas that are being put forward, and working together across different areas I think is really important. So I like that aspect of the CCA, and I also like the idea that we're bringing some of the central funding closer so that we get it into the right places for our county. So I think the overall goal is really important. I am concerned about the structure, and I think that is what remains to be seen. But I am very supportive of the way that we've bonded as a council and the issues that we've highlighted, because I think that they highlight the things that are important to us as a council so that we can bring this for West Devon's benefit, not just for the whole of the county. So I would be supporting this as well.
Thank you. Councillor Ewings.
Thank you. I have had quite a lot of tussle in my head at Devon Districts Forum, which Phil quite often attends. So he's heard quite a lot of the debate. The difficulty for me, and I know it's the law, but it doesn't mean I have to like it, is that Torbay is smaller than some authorities that are districts in Devon, but yet they get 3 seats. And that is the law. They're a much smaller authority. Their budget is not the best. And, you know, it seems like we're going to climb into bed. With the LEP is being subsumed into the CCA. So some of you may know there's 25 million sat in the pot in assets. But of that 25 million, Devon County get 52%, Somerset 33%, Plymouth 8.5, or is it 9.5, Phil? Anyway, and Torbay get 5.5%. But that 25 million that we all sat there and thought, yippee, is also currently being used for projects. There's more drawdown on that money. So how many of those pounds we actually receive in physical £20 notes, because we haven't got pound notes anymore, is, you know, it remains to be seen. There is no idea at the moment other than projects that are currently ongoing have to be completed by the 31st of March 2025. So they will only come under the CCA for that period of time, and then the CCA is up and running. There may be some assets transferred with that. I personally have no idea. I know the chief exec doesn't, and I don't think Phil knows of that many, but there may be. We do know there's a roundabout to nowhere in Somerset, a beautiful roundabout with all the road layout, but the industrial estate it was supposed to be going to has never been built. So, you know, we do know there's been significant failings. I accept that my chief exec is rather keen that I sit at this table. But sometimes I have this doubt that actually is the CCA going to be the new let that's set up to fail again? And I don't want to be on a failing organisation. I don't want to be part of one. I want to make it work, and particularly on the housing side. The other part, as Councillor Jury's alluded to, which I spoke to Lord Best about, who does the Housing Commission, and he helped us with the House of Lords amendment to be able to get every district a seat on the board. And it was only just lost the vote. So I'm going to pledge to you all that if I am put on this CCA, we will continue lobbying to get every district a seat on this board, which is only right and proper, that we all have our say. As Councillor West has just said, if we say no, literally we're going to be dropped. I mean, there's no other polite way to put it. And we will be little old West Devon in the middle of nowhere, having to fight for everything for ourselves. There'll be nothing devolved. There'll be no extra help. There'll be nothing, because we have chosen not to walk through a door. So I think it is important that we walk through the door. Am I doing it with the utmost confidence? No, I'm not. I'm being honest with you all. I've sat through loads of meetings with the chief exec, other chief execs and other leaders. We know what Teambridge's response was. They're like us, they're very nervous about it. If I was left to say, if you ask Councillor Wrigley outright, he'd say no way, but has realised you've actually got to say a bit more and give it a chance. So I would urge you all to actually do what we're doing by noting. And we all know in this council, we get very pedantic with words of noting, endorsing, adopting, etc. So we are going to note this with our comments, and with it strengthened a little bit for Councillor Saxby's, which Mr Hawke is doing at the moment. So therefore, I would urge you all to vote for this, please.
Thank you, Leader. Now, if there's no more debate, we'll go to the vote. Would you like to, Mr White, could you read the recommendations?
Thank you, Mayor. There's two recommendations. One, the council notes the intention of Devon County Council and Torbay Borough Council to enter into a devolution deal with government and to form a combined county authority, CCA. And recommendation 2, responds to consultation in line with the considerations set out in part 3 of the report. Subject to, I suggest now, A, inclusion of the additions in red font as set out in the updated agenda report, and B, strengthening the transport section, with Mr Hawke being given in effect delegated authority to do so following the meeting.
Thank you. Can we have a show of hands of all in favour, please?
That is 19 and unanimous. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So that is carried. Thank you, councillors, for your debate and very lively questions.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. So I'll call the meeting to a close at 17:36. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
I just ask those of you that are going, sorry, stay, seeing Caroline up. Lynn's not going to leave the room. If we could just have